All right, there we go. Welcome everybody to another episode of our Puget Systems Podcast. This week's a little special one because it's coinciding with our presence at GDC. My boss said that we couldn't stream from GDC at the booth, so instead we brought you the next best thing. We have Brett Nordquist. I'll let him explain his position. And Kelly, you've seen Kelly before a few times. And we're going to be talking about GDC, game development, and kind of the state of the industry from both the technical aspect, that's Kelly, and kind of like what's going on from our perspective as far as like customers and companies and what they're doing and moving and grooving in the space. So this is going to be pretty cool. So as I like to do, I'll kind of open the floor a little bit. Brett and Kelly will have a little bit of an intro, background, who you are and what you do for us here at Puget Systems. So we'll start with you, Brett.
Well, great. Glad to be here with Houston. My name's Brett. I've been at Puget Systems, I guess, a little over a decade now. Started out doing consulting and then moved into more of a account management role where I collect feedback from some of our like more high profile customers and kind of get that back to Puget so that we can like improve our products, improve our services and such. So that's kind of what I do today. I kind of as an account manager.
Right. And we've met Kelly before a few times, but just in case anybody doesn't already know, Kelly, who are you and what you do?
So I'm Kelly. I am the Puget Labs kind of 3D expert. I do all things 3D content creation, game development, rendering, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right on. So I guess just to start, so the expo hall just opened today. Mm-hmm. So there's been kind of sessions and talks and stuff prior to that. I guess, is there anything really interesting or cool that you guys have seen coming out of GDC yet so far?
One big announcement was Unity's new enemies trailer showing off their new high definition rendering pipeline.
Oh, I missed that.
I can hold on. Share screen.
Oh, cool. Yeah, share screen.
All right,
here we go.
So this is just a YouTube video, but this is a new demo they have running real time in the engine. They said that this is on an i7 with a 3090 and is getting about averaging about 40 frames per second using a 3090. So again, very high end workflows, but it is a real time in-engine product. Like they have, it's a pretty detailed thing. So this is like their direct like response to Unreal Engine and all they're doing with virtual production and higher end game productions.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, because Unreal Engine catches a lot of the kind of the flash and the big top billing news. Unity, I think, traditionally has been kind of relegated to like mobile games and and things like that, which I suppose getting further along now, it's a little unfair. Like they're doing they're making some major plays too. That's amazing. Like
so. I mean, they this follows them buying out Weta Digital not too long ago. Right. So kind of incorporating some of that talent and some of that engineering into their new stuff. Yeah. Showing off what they can do real time with the virtual character, kind of like Epic has with MetaHumans.
Okay.
Unity has a similar thing called Ziva, I think. Someone's in chat that might know. But it's kind of Unity's response to that.
I see.
So yeah, they are making serious plays to get into the high end as far as graphical needs of an engine.
Yeah. Wow.
It's like they've been doing some pretty big games for a long time. Like I think Mario Kart uses Unity.
Okay.
Like there's some good titles behind them, but nothing that's like pushing the graphical bounds.
Yeah, that seems to be the
case. That's
case.
where they're really going to right now.
Awesome. And so you kind of mentioned a couple little blips about like virtual production and things like that. So that's, I feel like, an interesting angle, because like we have a booth presence at GDC, traditionally more towards video games, right? Game development conference. But that doesn't seem to be the main, or it doesn't feel like the main topic this year. Like it seems like a lot of it is being focused on how to leverage these game engines in different ways. Yeah. And that's pretty cool. I'm really enjoying seeing how what's been traditionally sort of encapsulated in kind of one area is kind of like branching out into everything, filmmaking and just interactive media, I suppose. Yeah, that's really neat. Brett, I wonder, I know I personally, as kind of the voice of Puget Systems, sometimes have had to dissuade some folks focusing on like the enthusiast market. But with this push, more people are using these game engines for other things just than video games. What are some of the things that you've seen popping up in that space?
Well, I just to go back on like some of the stuff that's come out. It seems like every few years we get kind of a push for like virtual PC workstation in the cloud. And I saw Kelly posted something earlier about that with Microsoft's announcement today. I think it's called ID at Azure. And it really looks geared towards kind of smaller development studios, indie game studios, maybe that purchasing a lot of workstations up front, especially when people are mobile right now. This maybe could be kind of a way to help them get them started without making a massive investment into the hardware. And that is definitely one thing we're seeing with some of our customers is these developers, when COVID hit, and then, kind of making our way around what does it look like when people start coming back. And we have seen a push to people purchasing multiple systems. I think initially we thought how much of that would be handled by mobile or laptops, but I think we quickly saw that to keep them efficient and keep them working as they were in the office, they kind of needed a similar system at home. So that is one thing we're seeing as we work with some of the smaller studios is multiple system requirements, getting a duplicate system at home, one in the office. So I'm always interested when this cloud stuff comes up because, recently had a conversation with one of the smaller studios, more in line of, hey, is this something that you would consider? Because they were in that startup mode still. And there are still a lot of questions around security, file size, especially when you're talking about, keeping the code as private as possible and not getting, everything's kind of under wraps here for a while until they kind of get going. So I think there's still some concerns about that, but certainly Microsoft putting their name behind it in something like this, that they are developers. I think that maybe they'll come out with a product that hits on more points than maybe what we've seen in the past.
Yeah. That brings up an interesting question. I'm curious, Kelly, you've got some experience in game development, like from the actual like production pipeline sort of thing. When cloud stuff gets brought up in other aspects of content creation, especially like video editing, it tends to be kind of like, you're not doing the really high end good stuff.
Right.
Does this make sense for game development, sort of a cloud development environment?
I think it's going to be similar to what we see in video editing and stuff, that like at a certain level it makes sense. Then as you go up the stack, it starts to make less sense.
Okay.
They specifically mentioned that like they're trying to find the next Among Us or the next Minecraft. These are games that have like lower end specs. So if you have a little bit of latency as you're working, it's not going to feel that bad.
Okay.
Whereas if you're doing the next Call of Duty or the next Battlefield and you have a little bit of latency, that can really impact with how you're interacting with things and how if your screen is full of stuff and then that's taking longer to download to your computer, like each individual image, that can impact things. So I think it makes sense at a certain level.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense too. Because I see the quote here about the next great Minecraft Cuphead among us, and they're hoping to kind of quote from the article there. And we hope ID at Azure can be a catalyst for those teams to reach even greater success. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So they're specifically calling out those lower end spec games.
Yeah, that's kind of cool though. It kind of makes sense. Or I like the idea that you don't have to necessarily just jump straight to having a real high-end machine, or if you're just kind of goofing around or testing some idea you don't have to drop a whole lot of resources into the whole environment and everything. And
right,
that's smart. That's a cool play there.
Yeah, a lot of the game development groups that I'm members of, there's a lot of people that join in that are like don't know anything about game development. They're just trying to get started, and their question's always like, hey, I have this computer, is it going to work for Unreal Engine? And the computer's like 10 years old or something. And it's like, it will, depending on what you're trying to do, but this then gives them an opportunity to like, well, I can just log into this and kind of get started, get my feet wet, see if it's something I want to do until they have the resources to have their own system or to do whatever.
That's really neat. I'll have to read more into this because I'll get distracted and just kind of space out while I read this article. But I'm actually really curious about this because it feels like it's really put.
I mean, the article has a lot about the virtual machines and then about other aspects of the ID at Azure that have just a lot of things to help, like a lot of cloud-based computing things that, like, if you want leaderboards or if you want to have some kind of storage in a cloud that your game needs. Yeah. If you're an independent developer and you don't want to spin up your own servers, and like that's all built into this. So that way they can, the final gameplay, have online stuff and servers are ready for them.
Right. I'm not sure. So I have kind of an idea of this question, but I'm not sure how to parse it, I suppose. I'm just really fascinated with how I feel that there's going to be there's more and more of this crossover of sort of reality with gaming, or because it seems I'm just reminded of like the early days of machinima, red versus blue, and that's those sorts of things. And I just have this crazy feeling that like we're going to feel more and more injected into our, not just video games, but into the content that we're consuming. And I don't know how to like take this idea and put it into a question, but I'm curious if that's any cross your mind at all, or Brett, if you've seen any sort of thoughts in that direction as well.
When you're talking about stepping into the game, I mean, it's funny, each night I've got a couple of young sons who run upstairs to me and they're all sweaty, and I can tell they've had their VR headset on, so like you definitely seen that. I'm interested. I mean, I think what Kelly touched on is people do these studios. It seems to be going kind of at least two directions here. On the very high end, as realistic as possible, put the player into this environment. It almost becomes their environment. And then on the low end spec, the Among Us, the Minecrafts that kind of run on anything that may or may not need a constant internet connection. But some of those games that I think they become popular because of that, because they run on low end and they'll run on anything. You can run it on a 10-year-old system, an old Android or iPhone or old iPad you've got sitting around. So I'm really interested in seeing that. And I see like even myself and those that are in my family that are into the games kind of jump between those different modes of playing. And then you've got the Switch, you've got this, the Steam Deck. There's just a lot of really interesting stuff going on right now. Like even being able to take the game and, take it in the car with you, take it while you're sitting in the doctor's office. I think that is a level of personalization that is becoming expected. I mean, I think that's what people want. So they want to be able to play these games across multiple devices on any time that they feel like it. Challenging for parents and challenging for teachers, I'm sure, when you've got this, but just the possibilities and opportunities are just endless right now.
Well, I think beyond that too, there's a big push to extend these worlds into other media. Like we have the new Halo series out on Paramount.
Oh, is that out? Like out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't have it, so
I'll check
haven't
that
seen
out.
it yet. But I think there's a few other games are getting some kind of movie or TV show treatments.
Arcane on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
That's
Arcane
League of
was
Legends,
a
right?
huge one. I really think that was a big motivator for Sony paying $3.6 billion for Bungie to acquire Destiny.
Wow.
Because like they want to, like, Destiny has books out, they have
Sure.
lore, and so they want to get the game and a movie or a TV series or whatever, because it's this ripe environment. So that way, like, it's not just your game, it's the game plus once you leave the computer or your Switch or whatever, you have other stuff to ingest and you know expand.
Oh, jeez, I hit the shrink button on my I remember years ago, almost probably 10 years now. There was a show called Defiance, I think is what it was called, and it came out coincided with a video game. And their big idea, was that like the show and the game were supposed to kind of influence each other. And I think the popularity and stuff and whatever, but I think maybe that was a bit ahead of its time, because I feel like the production like timelines for both a TV show and a video game tend to be kind of long. Like it's hard to have, something live that happens in an MMO go on to affect something on a television show when it takes you a long time to develop, and vice versa, really. Do you think maybe we're getting to a better sort of parity in that sense, where maybe we could have live events both on a television show then affect your game and vice versa?
Potentially. For both cases, you're still talking months, if not years worth of development to get something to a shipping state. So it would take a pretty coordinated effort before filming begins.
Sure.
And then you don't know what the outcome is, so you don't know how you're going to need to implement something else. I think what has changed since Defiant or whatever that game was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Something like that. I remember playing the game. The game was pretty terrible. That the production values of both game and game-related media has skyrocketed. Because like what Marvel has done with their whole cinematic universe has really propelled that. And used to be like comic book movies were just kind of a joke. They weren't that good. Right. A couple of Batmans that were good, some that were terrible, but now it's become the norm to have that kind of quality, that kind of production behind. I remember when one of my favorite games, Dungeon Siege, they made a movie about Dungeon Siege, and they got that Uwe Boll to direct it, and it was just a train wreck. And like that used to be the state of game movies, was like you had to find someone willing to invest in this, and that was someone that doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
Now, like, you have huge movie producers like, I want to do a game, I want to do a comic book, I want to do whatever, and you have the actors that are A-list celebrities that like want to be part of this now. So I think that's kind of accelerated what they could do. So if someone was to try that like crossover now, I think they might do it a little differently than they tried. I don't know if they try to make it influence back and forth.
Sure.
But I think they would make a much better product.
I think too, especially with the push behind for virtual production, I feel like it would be easier to cross some of that over because your assets are right there. Like whatever you've got built for the show or movie, I imagine, and it wouldn't, I would say easy, but at least easier to take that and then inject that into a game or something a little more interactive. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, especially if you're doing like a virtual production with like Unreal or even within Unity. The assets, it's the same thing. It's literally the same map. You can open that on any LED volume, and you would want to. There's some setup you have to do to make that work, but the assets are all there. It's all ready to go. Whatever optimizations you did to make the game work good is going to make it even smoother when you're trying to record the video, which is what a lot of the movie people are struggling with, is figuring out how the optimizations of a game works.
Oh, sure.
And whereas the game developers have that down, and I definitely see it could go a little bit better. But also, like, if we look at Halo, they've changed Master Chief, and they kind of changed a lot of the story and plot points and stuff to fit the film. So I think from the ground up, maybe it would impact how the game is made versus where it was before.
Yeah.
Just because different media kind of tells stories different ways. So
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. We do. Just kind of an interesting question. I'm curious, maybe I don't know if there's quite an answer, but Hope Through Prophecy on the YouTube asks, do you foresee NVIDIA creating a graphics card that optimizes H265 4x2x2?
that'd probably be a Matt question.
Yeah.
A little outside of my wheelhouse.
Sure. And really, though, who knows? Who knows what NVIDIA decides to do?
Yeah.
They're going to be weird.
Yeah, NVIDIA kind of does what they do. I'm still thinking about Kelly's Dungeon Siege reference. I've spent too many hours wandering the desert looking for the chicken area in that game.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you didn't do that, you just didn't play Dungeon Siege.
Yeah.
So, funny story about Dungeon Siege real quick. When I was in school, the program that I was in was kind of a combination film or game development. Like, they were kind of dipping their toes into game development because this was a long time ago. And so I had a project for class that, like, we had to reach out to local companies to get a tour of doing whatever they do and do a write-up on that. And so the group that I was working with, we wanted to do games. So, like, we reached out to like 30 different game studios in the Seattle area, and Gas Powered Games was the only person that responded yes.
Aww.
And
Wow.
so we went down there, and Chris Taylor, the founder of Gas Powered Games, who's a legendary game developer, he personally gave us the tour and, like, showed us around, gave us a whole bunch of merch. And, like, that was the moment that I was like, yep, game development's where I want to go. Like, that's the way I'm going, not this film stuff.
Nice. To follow this tangent just a little bit, I did some computer science toward the end of my high school career, and I wish that I got into it. I wanted to make video games. That was the plan, right?
Mhm.
But all of the career advice and, like, outside experts and stuff that they would bring in to, like, talk up computer science and programming were super boring. Like, accountant stuff, a lot of financial, like, code guys were coming in there to talk about, like, what they did, and that really turned me off of wanting to be a programmer. I wish they had hyped up some other stuff than just the boring, like, number.
Yeah, we saw the people that design weapons and stuff like that, and they literally just sit in Excel. Like, they're not in an engine, they're not playing the game, they're in Excel, like, charting out, like, as the character increases this stat, and then this thing does this. And yeah, a lot of game dev is pretty boring, but if you have the mind for it, like, it's
yeah. Let's touch on Unreal Engine 5 a little bit. I know Brady mentioned that a touch, because Leviathan Prime on Twitch here asked, he said Unreal Engine 5 looks real interesting. And I know prior to this, Kelly, you mentioned that there was a new demo that they put out, I think. Is it, or am I mixing that up with the Unity thing?
Unity just put one out.
Okay.
Unreal's has been out for quite a while.
Okay. I think I crossed those over. But what's the big deal with Unreal Engine 5?
So Unreal Engine 5 basically is, they took their Lightning engine and, like, redid it from the ground up. It's kind of a hybrid of ray tracing and rasterization, because before it was rasterization was the traditional way of rendering graphics. And then they introduced ray tracing, which was pretty much just another layer added on top of the stuff. And so this is, they, like, kind of, like, did it from the ground up. They have a new lighting system called Lumen that kind of does some fake real-time ray tracing to, like, bridge the gap between real-time ray tracing, which is extremely performance heavy,
Yeah.
and rasterization, which is really light. And it was just like, if you enable it, all of a sudden you'd see your frame rate drop to a quarter of what it was before.
Yeah.
And so Lumen's trying to like kind of bridge that gap. It can do full real-time ray tracing or not. And then when it's not doing full real-time ray tracing, it's a lot better. But so yeah, that's the main thing. And then the other thing is Nanite, their new virtualized geometry system, where so actually I have it up right now if you want to switch over to my share.
Yeah. This one.
Yep. So this is Unreal Engine 5. This is all real time. All of this is geometry. There's nothing here that is like a 2D thing.
Okay.
I can click on any of these objects and they're just objects sitting out there. So this would be millions and millions and millions of polygons. So I can go to Nanite visualization. Let's not do that.
Well, hold on. What is that?
So I'm trying to get to the. Okay.
Whoa.
So this is now showing all the triangles that are in the scene because everything's built out of triangles.
Right.
And these little tiny, like each color is a different triangle. So as we move in, go faster. You can see how the triangles are kind of changing density and getting smaller or whatever.
Right.
So what that means is that this, as you're moving further away or getting closer, it's changing the number of triangles that are on that model to fit what can be displayed on the screen. So that way, instead of having these tiny triangles, they're now smaller than a pixel, that it's still trying to calculate this triangle that isn't really going to affect a pixel. It's only working on what will actually be seen. And it's just doing the geometry based on how far it is from the screen.
Wow.
Which means you can have these, let me set my speed a little faster here. You can have these massive, massive environments that just go on and on and on.
Wow.
And the performance stays good because you're not trying to render all that. You don't have to spend time to make these LODs, level of details, where you have an object, but then you have to make a lower poly version of that same object, and then even lower poly version. You have like 8 different steps that it goes through, and the engine would just like substitute them in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where in previous games you would see a lot of like this pop in, where like all of a sudden something in distance would like change shape or change its texture or whatever. That's Lumen is promising. We'll see if it takes place to make that a thing of the past, where it can just, you make the one object and then the engine handles it from there.
Wow.
And these like a lot of detail in here. Like, this is all geometry. So if I go back to my triangles, you can see how like get right up to this thing and there's still triangles. Whereas before you would have made this very smooth, very few triangles, and then used a normal map or whatever to make the details. And now they just do it in geometry.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, it seems to be fairly, I guess, performance optimized. I'm not quite sure the vocabulary to use, but I mean, you're doing this while you're streaming. This is you're running this right now, like on the same machine. Like that's pretty cool. And fairly modest system, I imagine. I don't. You don't run dual 3090s or anything at home, are you?
I have a 3090.
Okay, still that's which makes sense. If
a 5950 and a 3090, so I'm pretty up there.
Okay, and I guess that makes sense, especially from a game development standpoint. You want to kind of, I imagine you would want to work your way down, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. And so that's why we've been seeing a lot of game developers jumping onto Unreal Engine 5. Ninja Theory is using it for Hellblade, which the demo that they've shown is just amazing. And then there was the Matrix had a demo recently that was really good, that was running on consoles on Unreal 5. And the big news recently was CD Projekt Red is adopting Unreal Engine 5 for the next Witcher game.
Yeah.
Which is a huge deal because for the past 15 years, I'm guessing. They've been using their own internal engine called the Red Engine. Most internal game engines don't have very unique names. It's named after the company. So they use Red Engine for starting with Witcher 2, I believe.
Okay.
And so Witcher 2, 3, all the expansions plus Cyberpunk 2077 were all using Red Engine.
Yeah.
Them moving to Unreal Engine 5 is pretty big news. And that's how they chose to announce their new game.
I imagine this is going to be helpful for them because
yes,
I think they, and I don't know enough about how games are made enough to really say, but it feels like they had trouble going from a third person hack and slash sort of action oriented game to a first person, almost Skyrim, Oblivion style RPG.
Yeah.
And I imagine then move into something like Unreal Engine where a lot of that's kind of built in is going to help.
Yeah. So this is going to do a couple things for them. They have the engine itself. So now they don't need developers trying to update code from 15 years ago or start over or whatever they need to do. So they have a base engine. Then also they're big enough, and according to the press release that they've sent out, they're basically working with Epic. And anytime that one of these big studios takes on Unreal Engine, they'll get support from Epic. So if there's some major change they need done to the engine, they'll reach out to Epic. Epic will make it happen, and they kind of go back and forth. This is not just for CD Projekt Red, but Epic also gains from this too, because one of the other big pushes with Unreal Engine 5 is this ability to do these massive open worlds.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, sure, with that nanite thing you were just showing us.
Yeah, if you go back to screen, so you can see this massive world here.
Yeah.
Now, over here on the right, you can see this little mini map.
Yeah.
The light colored squares are the areas that I've loaded into, and that's where it ends right there. That's where that little hole is. So everything else has not been loaded out, but I can open up everything that's on this map. So what you see on my screen is just this little square. So they're trying to push into these massive open worlds that CD Projekt Red has huge experience doing and is like one of the top open world game developers. So they're basically going to work together to improve Unreal Engine 5 for open worlds. So yeah, they're going to get CD Projekt Red gets the help of Epic behind them now. I'm curious to see what else they have planned for this. The press release made it sound like pretty in-depth business partnery going on.
Yeah.
Is there going to be anything else? Is there going to be good old games available through Epic Marketplace? Is there going to be, because they own that?
Because CDPR owns GOG. Oh yeah.
So will there be a partnership there? Is there going to be a buyout at some point? CD Projekt Red has a long track record of working in crunch, overworking their developers and stuff.
Yeah, they got kind of a finger wagging at the cyberpunk stuff for that.
So this will kind of take a lot of that demand off of developers and might help with that, depending on the situation. So yeah, there's a lot to be gained from both sides by this partnership. So it's gonna be pretty interesting. And we know Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal in general, their graphical fidelity. So that Cyberpunk that CD Projekt Red is going to take full advantage of that and really make a really good looking game. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Brett, in your time working with this, has there been, so it's not, let me rephrase. Game development is not something that we have traditionally put a lot of effort into attracting. Have you noticed that that they've kind of come to us more as these things have kind of advanced and gotten a little bit easier to work with?
I think a number of them have, and if we've been able to kind of, the more benchmarks, the more testing we've done, I think people look to that as well. There does seem to be I wouldn't call it unusual amount of interest around Unreal Engine 5, but hey, we need to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. Even some of the smaller companies that maybe would have waited for some of the larger companies to adopt it are jumping in headfirst into it. So a lot of the systems that we're selling, that people are coming to us, they want to make sure that they're spec'd out to that they can run Unreal Engine 5 for a number of years. And really that's one difference I've seen over, I'd say, since I was in consulting is we used to build, developers were always considered a kind of maybe a bit finicky, really, and they come from a technical background, right? So it makes sense. They often are used to having their hands in every hardware decision. So they would often build their own system. And as we're seeing some of these smaller companies, they may start that way and they're like, hey, just kind of take care of it on your own. You know, here's the budget for parts. But because developers are in such demand, because their time is so valuable, we're seeing, I think, some kind of approach us and say, hey, we want to make sure our developers that's what they're doing, that they're not spending time troubleshooting front panel USB ports, for example. We want to make sure, and so there does seem to be these kind of more customized workflows where I think years ago we would create kind of this general purpose developer system, and we'd kind of hope that it would work for them, and maybe they would tailor it once they got it to get it to do what they want. But now we're customizing systems for very specific workflows, whether it's a developer, designer, 3D artist, whatever, motion capture, so that we've brought on people like Kelly so that we can do this. So we were kind of hoping, we're going to put this out in the market. We kind of hope it fits. Now we're saying we've done the tests, we've got people in-house like Kelly that know this stuff, and we can offer a solid solution. And I really think that's the reason why the game development, the number of workstations that we're selling has increased, because we have that expertise in-house now.
I also think there's been as game development progresses, some of these bigger studios are getting just massive. And like you mentioned that kind of at the start when there are just a few employees and you have a lot of highly technical people on the team that they can build a computer. And so they're just like, we know what we need. I'll just go buy the parts and build it myself. As these companies get bigger, like Bungie is, last I heard, over 800 people or something like that. And when you get to that size, you have people that are so specialized in what they do that, like, the artists, you have these people that are focused on creating a character or whatever. They might not know the technical side that much. And so now the IT is like, well, we don't have time to build 900 computers. We don't, there's these different needs these different people have, and they don't have the expertise to build it themselves. So now it just makes more sense for us to reach out to someone that builds computers to be like, hey, I need, 50 computers to supply this new team that we're spinning up. These are the jobs they have. What do we need? So yeah, I think we're just the nature of the industry growing that they're reaching out to us a little bit more.
Yeah. Not to beat it up, but it can be used as a differentiator, because it's so difficult to find, developers, starting on day one with a solid, high performance workstation is going to be just a better experience for a new employee than here's some parts from the parts bin from IT. Keep your fingers crossed, hope it works. And not to kid, but that's really what we've seen. And even companies that have worked with some of the larger computer companies, maybe it's a little bit more reliable, but what I'm hearing is that they're unable to configure it for their specific workflow, or they're maybe not able to get the specific drive configuration or specific GPU or CPU with the motherboard and like proper cooling, right? So like maybe they get everything right and they forget fans and it overheats and shuts down on them. So just I think Kelly's point to some of these smaller studios jumping in from kind of day one, they understand what happens as they grow and it becomes more difficult. And your point to the artist is correct. There are not everybody at these studios really wants to build their own system and troubleshoot it and support it. So we have been able to branch out from developers as other departments design, the artist, even though we're still learning what their workflows look like. We're seeing them jump on and say, okay, yeah, we can spend our time doing what we love instead of troubleshooting. So that's definitely expanded our offerings as we've been able to get in building these, solid developer machines.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I wonder too, though, is when it does come from the technical background, is there much friction in like what they think they need versus what maybe we recommend?
I kind of see at least two in the ones that I've worked with. They're either very technical and they know exactly what they want, down to even the model of motherboard or brand of drive or brand of RAM. Or they come to us and those people, we assume they know their workflow. We may ask a few follow-up questions to make sure, especially on the higher end. They tend to build as fast a system as possible. And maybe there is some overkill built into there. But what we're seeing, I think, more as we feel more comfortable in this space and as we gain a reputation for being able to do this work, is people coming to us with the questions around their workflow. Hey, I'd like to be able to do this. I can't do this today on my system. What does that look like? So I think that's what we're seeing more of. Here's the applications I need to run well. Can you build me a system that I can run all of these at the same time and do some rendering on my system without, it bringing it to its knees? So those are, I think, some of the things we're seeing more of, just like wanting to optimize it for their specific workflow.
Yeah, we have one developer that we build a lot of computers for, that we had sold them several, and then they came to us one time and was like, hey, can you test this one specific thing and just give us like a scatter shot of a few different systems so we can know what the performance difference is for that task? And that changed what CPU and motherboard they bought from then on. It was like this one little thing, which was compiling shaders. They're like, that's going to determine how we build the rest of our computers. And yeah, they're that focused. And
so did that also then affect what we were offering? Like, did we kind of already know?
That was like when I first joined the team. That was like one of the first things I did for game development, was that test. And I already kind of knew that was going to be the case. Just our recommend system at the time didn't reflect that. So that was just kind of that showed a change in our recommend systems from then on.
Oh, that's cool. That's neat, because I know sometimes, I mean, a big part of what labs does is we need that sort of that information of like, what are you all doing? And then, is what we're offering make sense for that? And it's cool to hear that, we were able to help them, and then they in turn kind of helped us by asking that question. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right, so I always tell people, like, if you want to see anything else in the benchmark, just let me know. Like, I'll figure out a way to do it, but I need to know what your bottlenecks are.
Right. Yeah, because we're not making video games. We make them.
And like, different people have different needs in their game, so let me know and I'll see what I can do. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Is there, so other than, I mean, we've kind of touched on some of the future looking stuff, but what other things are out there that both Brett and Kelly that you're excited for in game development and the I suppose in the periphery of it?
One thing that comes to mind is like storytelling, and without getting like too detailed about it, we recently had a visit with the game studio, and they focused, we hear a lot about specs and this amazing technology and visuals and feeling people like they're in this, second world. And But yeah, his focus was on storytelling and how he really, when he hires people that can tell compelling stories. And he comes from a film background, obviously, where that like really matters. But that fascinates me too. Just as we get further, there's our games that have great visuals, but like I'm still drawn to a lot of the older games that tell a really good story. There's a small indie game from years back called Firewatch that ran on a lot, and it just, if you haven't played it, it's worth just bringing up just to kind of see what it's like. But it's not a game in a traditional sense. I mean, some people may call it kind of a walkthrough, but I'm really interested in as we get more into this. We always talk about the technology, but I was excited to hear from the studio that like they're still focused on the story, compelling a story. Ocarina of Time's another one. Like it just, I think back to some of these games as I was growing up in school and playing it. Just the ones that have a story that bring up some of those emotions are the ones that come to mind, and those are a couple. But yeah, if you haven't played Firewatch, check it out. It's a fantastic little game.
Yeah.
Campo Santo or something like that, I think is the studio.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I always talk about with people looking to get into game development. And a lot of people look into what hardware do I need first.
Sure.
And for me, that's kind of a little bit backwards, because like you don't need Unreal 5 and the highest, a 3090 with a Threadripper thing to make Firewatch. Like those didn't exist when that game was made, but it's still an amazing game. It still looks really good today. A lot of games, like they have a really good aesthetic and they tell an amazing story, and they're made 10 years ago or longer. Like we don't have that tech back then. So it's not always a question of like, what's the best hardware? It's like, well, what do you want to do? Like what story are you trying to tell, and then work from there to figure out what kind of systems you need.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like Half-Life was a great, Half-Life 2, great game. The story, visuals, pretty good. But I'd kind of, if you had to err to one side, either like amazing visuals, poor story, great story, mediocre visuals, I'll always side on the like mediocre visuals and take the story, because look at Minecraft. Roblox is a good example of that too. I mean, the first time you saw Minecraft, I don't think anybody was blown away with the visuals before all the skins and stuff. So yeah, that is definitely a part I'm interested in on the technical, and then just again like a lot of the stuff around VR, some of the things I'm interested in. I remember years ago going down to CES, and Intel had a large booth, and they had drones and VR stuff, and there were a lot of real estate agents there, and they were just like looking at like, oh, this is going to be the future of like viewing homes. I live in the state of Washington. I'm looking for a home in say California, and I'll just be able to tour it virtually with this VR headset. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of other applications around that too, in terms of like fitness and things like that. I follow a guy on TikTok who uses VR for his customers to help them get in shape and stuff. So just other applications besides just like the gaming stuff that I think will expand. I think Nintendo, I think some of the stuff they do a good job with expanding, not just being a game company, but almost, I hate to say lifestyle company, but there is some of that where they can expand it into audiences, whether it's an older audience, younger audience, outside of kind of the traditional gamer that we think of.
Yeah. They're not so focused on a keyboard and mouse or a controller. They're looking at how do you interact with this game, how like other ways of doing it. They had that, what was it called? Nintendo Labo?
Oh yeah, the cardboard thing that you put together.
Yeah, and you build it, and
they've done things like that. I mean, the Wii, obviously, with motion controls, and they're good at making really good games, but also like, how can we do something other than just push a button?
Yeah.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, they do push that kind of the boundary or the limits of how we interact with things. Because like even right now they have that fitness ring sort of thing that works with the Switch. And then with like the Wii, they had the board and whatnot for the Wii Fit stuff and the nunchucks and all that. That's interesting. I like that. It's more of an experience that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think they're more of a experience company than a game
company.
You know?
I think it widens it too. I remember going down and seeing, at my parents' home, and they had kind of a little area there that had games and stuff set up, and they had, a number of Wiis there for a much, older audience. That Kelly's point about like the mouse and keyboard, for a lot of people, if you didn't grow up using that, that's a pretty difficult input to learn, especially if you didn't do that as a kid. So I think, expanding, whether it's a screen or it's a different type of controller, you think with the VR, you just it's just there. You just wear it. There's not like having to worry about ports and being, close to an outlet. Just being able to put this thing on and walk around, and it really changes like what you can do and where you can do it.
Yeah. I still think VR is still very niche. I feel like it's not. It's still waiting for a big hook, the thing that's going to make it that everybody wants it. It's really cool, and I think it's getting more and it's growing more and more. But it's still so very much video games. Really, I know because of the industries that we're in that there's architectural visualization and like you were saying the real estate, you can 3D scan the house and people can walk through it and stuff. But I wonder, what's it going to take to get wide adoption where everybody's going to have one?
I think the hardware needs to get faster, because like you have to render so many frames to get a good looking result and not get motion sick. So hardware needs to improve, but at the same time, it needs to get smaller, because right now, like headsets are still pretty clunky, and not everyone wants to put this giant headset on when they want to play a game and then get lost in the room and get tangled up by some cords hanging out the back if they don't have a wireless version. And I think that's the biggest thing right now, is that like the uber techie are willing to deal with that kind of stuff.
Right.
The non-tech people that would buy a Switch or a Wii and play that, they're not going to be interested in this kind of specialized hardware.
Yeah, I'd wondered if it was a specific game, but I kind of think maybe I'm wrong on that too. I think there's some issues around who controls the headset, what they, if I have to have a Facebook account, I think there's some concern around some of these issues. How much of my information do I have to give this company, especially when some of the games are still free? But I agree with Kelly. The size, the battery life too of these as well is a factor. But yeah, I've kind of wondered if it would take a specific game, like you see, that's kind of going back to the console model where they, rely on a very, top tier game to sell the hardware. But I don't know. It feels like there are a lot of games out there, but maybe nothing that's been so compelling that drives, mass sales of these things. I do see it picking up, at least with the younger, some of my younger kids. It does seem like they and a lot of their friends now have them, and then that helps breed as some of these games, are multiplayer. Then they want to play together. Then that kind of encourages them to get their own headset for it. But I agree. I think we're still a little ways off from it going super mainstream. Yeah. It's interesting too, because it takes you out. I feel like it's different from the normal way of playing games or just interacting with any sort of media, because I feel like it takes you out of, well, and I think that's kind of part of the point, right? Virtual reality. It takes you out of your space, your reality. And that's a weird jump to make. It's such a strange way of interacting.
Yeah. It takes you out of it, but then also it doesn't give you a good way to move around efficiently that feels right. Because sometimes if you're just using like a D-pad to walk forward or whatever, and you're just standing there wielding swords and stuff, but you have stuff to push this button and your legs aren't moving, and then your world's moving around you, that makes you feel weird. Or you just like jump point to point, and that also doesn't feel real, like there's still some that kind of limitations it needs to overcome. Like, how do you move this and feel right?
Do you think there'll be more of a push toward sort of passive consumption content, like virtual reality movies, storytelling in that way?
There's been some of that. Even a lot of, I think all of the VR headsets, you can watch a movie in it.
Sure.
Like, has a virtual screen that you're just looking at, and you can like look around and stuff. Maybe, but I think again, it comes down to: would you rather sit on your couch and look at a TV screen over there, or do you want to put this headset on?
Yeah.
You know,
It makes it hard to converse. If it's just
Yeah.
you, that's maybe one thing, but like you're a bunch of friends and you get together to watch the Super Bowl or something. I don't
Right.
know. See everybody wearing headsets. It's
Yeah.
part of like the social part in the game, but you're right. It is difficult. Your point, Houston, to be able to come back out of reality.
Yeah.
And it's often a different part of your home. So yeah, it is a little bit different. I think a lot of that's still to be figured out.
And if you're like sitting on the couch watching a movie and you're like, I want to run to the kitchen and grab a drink real quick. And like, if you can still see the TV or something, you can just run and grab it. You can still hear what's happening. With the headset, you have to like pull this off and then go run, and you can't hear anything, can't see anything. You just pause it and then come back. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, I'd like to see more push on augmented reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like that example you just gave, it could still be like sort of half painted into your vision, or it could kind of turn transparent a little bit as you're trying to interact with real reality, and then okay, I'm done, and you can whoop, it takes back over kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that would play a lot better into the social aspect of it too, because then you could have kind of have you guys seen The Kingsman?
No.
There's a few scenes where they're sitting at a like a boardroom table, and they're talking and stuff, and nobody's really there, and then it switches to one of the characters' views, and they have these special glasses, and they're all like sitting at this table, but in like a sort of virtual sense. And I feel like that's a little bit more of that sort of mixed reality plays better to that social aspect of
more of
a lot of things.
More of the Microsoft HoloLens as opposed to Oculus.
Yeah. I think that's really that I think is going to be the bigger hook.
Could be.
Yeah. Let's see. We only just have a few more minutes left. I'm wondering, have you guys seen anything interesting coming about in GDC? I know we kind of, before the stream, I was kind of trying to keep an eye on the hashtag and stuff on Twitter.
Right.
I was wondering if you guys have seen anything interesting coming out in the last few days or even today.
That's the only news I've seen. A lot of talk at GDC is around using AI to generate models and textures and stuff like that. Other methods of procedurally generated content.
Okay.
That's kind of the big deal, because as textures are getting bigger and as fidelity in games increases and all this stuff keeps growing, it's getting harder and harder to get the assets to get into the engine that are at a high fidelity, and like it takes a long time to model that, or if you were to try to create that by scratch, it would
take a long time,
forever.
Oh, sure.
Especially since you need, a color map, the albedo, and then a reflection map and a metalness map and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of AI going into things, being able to like do some minor photogrammetry and then run that through AI to upscale it and to make a tile and all this other stuff to be able to get this content, because it wants higher and higher fidelity content, which takes longer and longer to make, but timelines aren't increasing, and they just keep adding more people, and it's not very sustainable. So all this push around VR and procedurally generated stuff, like Substance is one of the big ones. Adobe bought them out not too long ago. So they have a lot of stuff going on at GDC right now that looks pretty interesting. And that's the big thing for me is that I'm looking at right now is AI-based stuff and procedurally generated stuff.
We saw a lot of industries really hurt with the pandemic, coming through, but I'm interested in just the overall health. It does feel like this industry, the gaming industry, is as even though there's a lot of technology changes going on right now, and it feels about as healthy as what it's been. The funding, the amount of money that's going into these studios, and really one of the biggest challenges I hear from them is just the hiring. They're just trying to get people in place now as people are coming back, but as people were locked in their homes, they didn't have a lot to do, and I think a lot of the gaming stuff just it was already flying high, but it really feels as healthy as what it's been. And I love the idea. I mean, the big studios are always going to be there, but just the health of the indie gamer right now, and have seen some of the focus. I haven't followed a lot of GDC so far, but it does seem like there are a lot of talks and a lot of discussions around the indie gamer, which is fantastic. Again, I love that, like some of those smaller Firewatch type games that just don't hit the mainstream, but are still really compelling games for those. So that's what I'm kind of I'm really excited to see, is just the health of this industry really seems to be really good right now.
Well, and the need for people, we're seeing that across into the film side as well. And it's kind of there's always been an overlap and a kind of a give and take between 3D filmmakers and game developers. People go back and forth quite often. But now that there is a push in the film side for virtual production using 3D game engines to drive walls or green screen content or whatever, there's now an even bigger draw that they need more people over there as well. And they're trying to steal all the game developers they can find. And then game developers are still trying to hire all the people they can have. And so yeah, there's a great demand for people that know 3D stuff.
Hey, yeah, there you go. If you're young out there and are looking to change a career or something, there you go. Video games or filmmaking. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. Oh, thank you. All right, so that does put us just a little bit over our hour, so we'll wrap it up. Is there anything else you guys would like to mention or shout out or anything before we go?
We covered a lot.
Yeah. Can people still view that webinar I did last week?
Yeah, actually, yeah. If you fill out the form, we can send you a link. Let me pull that up real fast. I think I have the landing page.
While he's pulling that up, last week I did a webinar on choosing the right hardware for game development. So if you're looking at game development, want to know what kind of hardware you need for programming versus art versus whatever, you can go to that webinar, and I kind of break down all the different segments of a computer to see what kind of helps improve your performance, so you can be better educated on setting up a computer for yourself.
Yeah, check that out. This is good stuff. But yeah, other than that, I want to thank you guys for taking the time out of the day to join us. I know it was really last minute, so I appreciate you guys making some space in your schedules to join us today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. And I always like to thank the audience as well for joining us today. We do this every Wednesday, sometimes live, but we're trying to sprinkle more sort of pre-recorded content as people's schedules don't always line up quite well. But whether live or pre-recorded, we do this Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. So mark your calendars. And Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Houston.